Good morning. I'm Ed Pozzuoli, CEO of Tripp Scott, and today we're honored to have our friend Scott Rasmussen here. Scott is a world-renowned pollster and political observer, and has got many projects on the table, which we're going to talk about today. But first, Scott, welcome.
Great to be with you, Ed. Always love talking politics.
So we're sitting less than a month away from the election, and so where does the race stand today between President Trump and Vice President Harris?
Let me begin with the most obvious statement, which nobody really knows who's going to win the election. I mean, look, we know that historically polls shift a point or two from the averages. If the polls shift 2 points in Harris' direction, she wins all the swing states. They switch in Trump's direction, he wins all swing states. Having said that, Trump has a very modest advantage right now. Maybe if it was a basketball term, I'd say it's a tie game and the possession arrow is going in his direction, or if it's baseball, he's up 1-0 in the fifth inning. Got the advantage, but there's a long way to go.
So let's talk about where we are in some of the key states, because it looks like it's coming down to 5 or 6 states.
Always comes down to a handful of swing states. They're different, If you look at the electoral maps going back over the years, these weren't etched in stone. They weren't written into the Constitution this way. But right now, there's 4 southern swing states: Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, and Georgia. Again, they're close enough in the polls. Something could happen either way, but I would expect Trump has the edge in Arizona and Georgia, and I would say he also has the edge in North Carolina. If Trump wins those 3 states, he then has to win one of the 3 blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin. If he were to lose all 3 of those, there is a magic opportunity for him, which I can't really imagine will happen. He could win Nevada, which is a toss-up, and then win the single electoral college vote in Nebraska too, which would make it 269, and Trump would win the election with that.
It would go to Congress.
It would go to Congress, and they vote, by the way, important. Most people think it's just a vote of the House. It's a vote of the House delegations. So however many states one party controls really would determine the president. But look, right now those races in the northern swing states, really, really close. Things you can watch. For me, I'm watching in Pennsylvania, what's the turnout going to be like in the Philadelphia area? What is the level of enthusiasm for Harris? Because if turnout is down at all in Philadelphia, Trump is going to do very well in the rural parts of the state, and he would carry the day. It is the most important swing state. But we also have to remember the swing states in the last couple of years have been decided by 10 or 20,000 votes. It's not impossible to imagine Trump losing Pennsylvania but winning Wisconsin.
Where does Harris's enthusiasm gap occur, say, between where Obama was when he was running and where Harris is today?
The biggest question is young voters, clearly not as enthusiastic as they were for Obama. And there is a shift among younger black voters. Nationwide, among black voters without a college degree, Trump gets 18% of their vote. Among black voters with a college degree, Trump gets only 5%. So the enthusiasm gap among that segment of the community is really important. And keep in mind, Pennsylvania is basically, it's Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Alabama in between. I mean, and so Trump will run up big margins in those rural counties. If there is not strong, enthusiastic turnout in Philadelphia from the black community, she's not going to win the state. Our latest polling in Georgia shows Trump +3 there. Our numbers in Pennsylvania showed as a toss-up. I feel a little more comfortable that he's going to win Georgia. Whereas Pennsylvania is still really anybody's guess. You can look for signs in both places, but you're never really sure if you're seeing signs or mirages. Wisconsin is the one that gives me heartburn because it has been, over the last 3 cycles, the single hardest state to poll. You may remember a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, one of the major polls said that Biden was going to win Wisconsin by 17 points just days before the election, and he barely hung on to win. We've seen a lot of different signals coming out of Wisconsin. I will say this, if Trump wins in Wisconsin, it is probably going to be because of the issue of biological males playing women's sports. That's an issue that's getting a lot of discussion, and it's something that separates progressive Democrats from more traditional Democrats, and I think it makes people uncomfortable with the Harris-Walz ticket.
In Michigan, where do you see that turning? Is that turning on, say, some of the pockets of Muslim votes and the enthusiasm for Harris?
Look, that's the ground zero for Democratic concerns about what's going on in the Middle East, because if they come out too strongly in favor of Israel, they offend some people. If they don't come out strongly enough, they offend a different group of people. Right now, when it comes to dealing with the Middle East, Donald Trump has an advantage over Harris of nearly 20 points, so it's fairly significant.
So as an example, 4 years ago, Biden was ahead in all of these states by a significant amount. 4 years before that, Hillary was ahead of Trump by a little less amount, but certainly ahead. And now you're seeing really these states, at least in the polling as of today, some of these states are even. Are we still under-polling Trump's turnout, or has that gotten better from a technical poll setting?
Well, we won't know that until November 6th.
Right.
But I think you're a little bit limited on that analysis. In 2012, the polls underestimated Barack Obama by a little over 3 points. In 2016, the polls, other than Wisconsin, which was just a nightmare, but other than Wisconsin, the polls were actually pretty good in 2016. The national polling, the average was 1 point off from the actual vote. Both Michigan and Pennsylvania were too close to call, and by the way, Trump was ahead in the last poll in each of those states. So that one was pretty good. 2020, clearly off. Polling during a pandemic was a nightmare. But I still look at the numbers. Look, if I'm trying to tell somebody to be realistic, not to cheer for your team, but to really try and understand what's going on, look at every state's average and look at it 2 points worse than you want it to be and 2 points better than you want it to be. When you do that, you see it can still go either way. But there are, again, those little signs saying maybe you'd rather have Trump's position than Harris's right now.
Let me finish up the west side, west Arizona and Nevada. Arizona, there was last time I believe what played into some of that result was with Biden winning was some of the McCain backlash. Some of that appears to have dissipated.
It's maybe dissipated, but I think a better way to state it might be it's much more focused on Carrie Lake. She is really struggling in the Senate race in that state, and I think some of that McCain backlash
is focused on her.
Focused on her,
not on the
Trump.
presidential race.
Right.
And in Nevada?
Nevada is another headache state to poll. It used to be a problem because Harry Reid had such a great machine. Didn't matter what the polls said, he would find a way to pull it out. He's not there anymore. Our latest numbers show that race is purely even. I hate to say it for anybody listening who has strong feelings about Nevada, but it is the least important of the swing states because really, if Trump wins the other 3 southern swing states and Nevada, it doesn't get him where he needs to get to. He needs to win one of the blue wall states.
Gotcha. And then the last piece with respect to polling, you've seen a little bit of an anomaly between where voters are and who they're supporting based upon education.
Absolutely. Huge, huge issue. We hear a lot about the diploma divide. The people with a college degree tend to be more Democratic leaning and without a college degree more Republican leaning. That's technically true. But the real gap is between people with a postgraduate degree and everybody else. Right now, Kamala Harris is winning by more than 30 points among people with a postgraduate degree. And among everybody else in the country, Donald Trump is leading by a little bit. So it's that, and that's about 15% of the population. By the way, we see the same thing in a state like Michigan. Harris really needs to have turnout low from everybody else without a postgraduate degree.
And what do you attribute that fact to?
Some of it's income, some of it's because they've been taught how to speak nicely to each other, some of it's their peer group. Don't really know what has driven it, but we do know that this gap, it's something we explore as part of a larger study we've done on the elite 1%. People are in a different bubble. They look at things differently. Part of it, and I hate to say this, but part of it is a little bit of arrogance among people with a postgraduate degree, a little bit of a condescending attitude towards people who aren't as educated as they are, and a belief that it'd be better for everybody else if they would just leave us alone and let us make decisions. You know, many years ago I spoke at Harvard, and a professor actually said that to me. Why won't these people just let us lead? That's what we were trained to do. And of course I said they don't like where you're leading, but that's part of the attitude, I think, that comes through.
Is it about maybe the economy impacts, the downturn
Right.
or inflation impacts them a lot less than somebody,
Right.
say, you know, who is making, you know, $50,000, $70,000 a year? The difference in
Right.
income going to gas and groceries is a significant greater percentage for somebody at that economic strata than
Right.
somebody in a postgraduate.
Generally speaking, if you've got a postgraduate degree, you're going to be making enough income, you're not worrying about that. You're not part of the 50 or 60% of America that lives paycheck to paycheck. And you don't experience the reality of that. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, a big chunk of your money goes to your rent or mortgage, big part goes to your car payments, other fixed income. You have a limited amount of disposable income each week. If the price of gas goes up, you know what the most common thing people cut back on is? Groceries. It's not theory, it's not economics, it's not percentages. It affects your life. Second biggest thing people cut back on when gas prices go up is eating out. So again, it's a real impact, and that's something people are experiencing, and they're reminded of it every single time.
So let me switch gears now that we've talked a lot about the election.
Yeah.
You've got a couple projects in the hopper. Why don't you talk about where, long-term, what kind of projects are you involved with?
So we created the Napolitan Institute earlier this year. It's a 501c3, and our mission is to lift up the voice of the American people so loudly it can't be ignored in the halls of power. We tend to believe that these elites with a postgraduate degree who make a lot of money,
A lot of them live in Washington.
a lot of them live in Washington or New York, they crowd out the voice of the public. They live in their own bubble, and they have views that, quite frankly, are concerning. They reject America's founding ideals. Most members, especially the politically active elites, believe the rest of us have too much individual freedom. They believe parents have too much control over their children's education. Most of them think that you should not be allowed to vote unless you have a college degree. That's the elitist attitude that is creating problems. So how do we deal with that? Well, first, we've been exposing it. You know, we've done 6 surveys now, members of this elite 1%, their attitudes on income and government and guns and everything else. And it's safe to say they are wildly out of touch with most of America. We also did a survey of federal government managers. So the people who are making the decisions, this is the deep state, if you will. I don't think it's a conspiracy at all. It's a fraternity because a lot of them went to the same schools and know each other in different ways. We asked these managers, what would you do if you thought a regulation was needed, but you knew it was overwhelmingly opposed by the American people? And they say, well, ignore the voters because we're right. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So that's been the one part of our project, is highlighting that side. And then on the other side, we're lifting up data that does more clearly articulate where voters are.
How do you express that? How is that implemented? I mean, that sounds like a great idea. You've identified, I don't want to say a problem, but it's a key observation.
Sure.
Right? It's a divide among a smaller group of people versus everybody else in America.
Right.
How do you even up the scale?
Well, the first thing you do with any problem like this in the public narrative world is you shine a light on it.
You identify the problem.
You identify the problem, and you identify what's bizarre about it. For example, most of these people believe they trust the government mainly because they have access to it. They also believe that most Americans trust the federal government. Well, actually, just 22% trust the federal government to do the right thing most of the time, and most voters haven't trusted the federal government to do the right thing since the early 1970s.
So the baseline argument of Ronald Reagan still remains. Government is not the solution, it's
That's
the problem.
And by the way, when Reagan was in power, trust in government went up. Why? Because the guy in charge understood.
Right.
So we're highlighting that gap. That's one thing. Second thing, once you begin to explain what that problem is, then you want to talk about how do we lift up another voice? How do we actually get other discussions into the mindset? And it's really, I can talk to you about all kinds of details about how we get the message out and how we want to shift the narrative over the next several years. But the problem ultimately comes down to the fact that you have to get good data into the hands of people.
Who understand it.
Who understand it, right.
So in other words, if I'm an elected congressman from a certain district and I understand that my district, my constituents are big Second Amendment, just as an example, Second Amendment supporters, then it's that kind of information is valuable to me to understand what positions I might stake out.
To understand where the opposition is coming from this elite world, 3/4 of whom want to ban private ownership of guns, and why people in your district are thinking about things differently. Very important to know that. It's also important for voters to know that. It's also important for people to recognize we're not nearly as divided as a people as we are politically. This elite 1%.
It screams the loudest.
Screams the loudest. They scream the loudest. They can have institutional power, and they are causing a lot of the divides.
Sounds like
in the
Sunday
country.
dinner at the Pozzuoli's.
Well, it could be. I haven't been to a Sunday dinner.
He who screams the loudest,
Yeah,
right?
but screaming the loudest, that does something. And when you're frustrated and you just punch back, that doesn't do any good. You've got to have a better understanding of what's going on. There are surveys that have been put out saying that most voters don't want to ban gender-affirming care for minors. And we did polling that showed 75 or 80% of voters want to ban puberty blockers and gender transition surgery. What's the difference? Nobody in the world knows what gender-affirming care means. So there's a poll that is put out in the elite language that is interpreted from their perspective to sell their narrative. It's simply not true. And we want to make sure people understand they're not alone in their beliefs.
Well, Scott, I appreciate it. That sounds like a very exciting project. I hope everybody listening who wants to get involved. How do they support the project if they want to get involved?
Simplest thing to do is to go to napolitaninstitute.org or napolitannews.org, and you can reach out on those sites and ask for more information. We have a complete report on the elite 1%. And we'll be happy to send that to anybody who would like to read it and then talk to you about it afterwards.
So one last question. How late is election night going to be?
Election week, you mean?
Election night, yeah, right. Well, but election night, before we know results.
That all depends on the state we talked about earlier, Pennsylvania. If Donald Trump is doing really well in Pennsylvania and it looks like the mail-in ballots aren't going to make any difference, well, then by midnight we'll know.
But doesn't Pennsylvania, I use this story this way. My son, when he was at University of Pennsylvania, called me up during the Romney-Obama race and said, looks like Romney's going to take Pennsylvania. And I said, no. Look and see what's reporting. And of course, all the rural counties reported first. And then Philadelphia came in.
Right.
Right.
We actually talked about this 4 years ago because during the pandemic, we knew that Trump was going to be ahead on election night and the mail-in ballots would come in late, and there was a much bigger mail-in ballot portion. The thing that I would look for on election night, more than anything else, is the turnout in Philadelphia. If that is at all down from 2020, then Trump should feel very good. Second thing I would look at are the returns from the collar counties. They have become more Republican in registration over the last couple of years, the counties surrounding Philadelphia. So if those margins are up, again, that's very good news for Trump. Having said that, I don't think we're going to know on election night. I think it'll still be close. And even if you think your candidate is winning, you're going to be watching the mail-in totals come every day and be nervous.
Yeah. Well, with that, Scott, thank you for your insights, and I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.